Good evening and welcome to the Audit Committee meeting of December 1st, 2021. We're going to quickly introduce ourselves and then get right into what we hope will be a short, sweet meeting. My name is Chris Vallon. I am a board trustee and chair of this committee.
Tracy Mayers, board trustee, board president, and audit committee member.
David Warner, board member, proud parent of Woodlands graduate.
Lisa Raymond, assistant superintendent for business.
Amy Ashley Moore, district treasurer.
Michael Owens, community volunteer and parent.
Chris Lazari, community volunteer.
And we have Laser Alert on the line.
Laser Alert, network administrator.
Thank you. Okay, so our first order of business is to adopt the meeting minutes from our November 8th meeting. Did everyone get a chance to review them, or should I pull them up fairly quickly? Let's see, I'll just do it anyway, if I know what I'm doing. Okay. Okay, so we last met on November 8th. Attendees were most of the people present tonight, in addition to our external auditors from the PKF O'Connor Davies company, Scott Oling and Melissa Zott. We, at that time, reviewed the draft independent or external audit report and recommended that it be presented to the Board of Education on their November 16th meeting. Let's see what else. The board did accept the report at that meeting, and it was subsequently filed with the appropriate authorities. And tonight we are reviewing the corrective action plan for this meeting. Does anyone have any amendments or suggestions for the minutes from the November 8th meeting?
Not for me.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, so Ms. Raymond, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, has provided us with the latest copy of the corrective action plan for the external audit, which will be presented to the board at our meeting next Tuesday, the 7th. I think, Lisa, unless you want to run us through it, maybe I'll just go bullet point by bullet point to see if anyone has any comments or questions, or how would you like to?
Well, if it would be okay with you, Trustee Vallon, I would like to kind of try to summarize, all right, so that we don't belabor the points, but these points are absolutely important, and Amy and I and the business office and Dr. Macaluso and Dr. Iverson have reviewed these, and we've taken them seriously. So if you look at the first bullet point, which is the compliance with federal program requirements, you'll see under this bullet point that there are 3 recommendations. One is that we weren't following the bidding requirements. And what they did was because we are under over the $750,000 limit, they had to do a single audit. So they pulled a couple of different vendors, and they noticed that we didn't go out to bid for those. Okay, so we will address that. And then they found that with the payroll and other expenditures, that they weren't in line with what we had already filed. So as you will know, and as we have stated previously, the business office really hasn't been involved in the grants, which is kind of odd, but we will deal with that, and we have changed that. So we have instituted, because Amy and I, over the summer, we realized all of this was happening, and we put in procedures, a mechanism for quarterly to have meetings with the grants coordinator, with Dr. Macaluso, anybody else who is involved with the grants, and the business office. Because you can develop a grant. You can apply for it. You can get accepted. But then once that happens, everybody just seems to say, okay, we're done. Well, we're not done, because what are those salaries? What are those expenditures that are coming out of the general fund? Because the general fund, as you know, as an interfund transfer, will help supplement the federal funds, because we're not on the same fiscal year, to provide those services. So really the business office needs to be involved. We have to be able to file the FS 25s, which is a drawdown of funds, which is needed throughout the year, because if we're going to pay for teacher A, B, and C out of the federal funds, but until those funds come in, the general fund is going to provide those services. We need to know when that is happening, so that Amy or somebody else in my office can file this FS 25, so that we can draw down the funds to reimburse the general fund. So we have put these mechanisms, we've already put them in place, and we're ready to have our second meeting so that we are all on the same page. And as you will see throughout this whole corrective action plan, more towards the end, you'll see where we are cited on that the payroll distribution and the final report that is filed didn't match with what we applied for. That's where the business office has to come into account. We need to be involved, which we weren't previously, which is fine, but we're going to correct that from here forward, that we are involved in all of these functions, so that when we do it quarterly, it's really, in a business office sense, and I'm sure with our two community members who are in the business function, they will understand. But let me just give you an example. For example, we have designated an employee that their salary, which is 0.89%, is coming out of a federal fund. Well, somebody who is doing the federal funds on the other side decided, nah, only 0.75% of their salary is going to come out of the federal funds. You need to let the business office know, because we need to accommodate for that. We need to be involved. So that's where Dr. Macaluso, Dr. Iverson, and I are working with the grants coordinator and working with the business office, so that we all are on the same page. Because really, if you think about it, come year end, our year end is June 30th. A lot of the grants are August 30th. We all have different years, but we all have to be on top of each other. I don't write the grants. I can't tell you what we need curriculum wise. That's where Dr. Macaluso and Dr. Iverson come in. But Amy and I, we manage the finance side. So that's what we're trying to tie in here. And I think that we have put a good mechanism together that we will be able to do that. So that's what is addressing this first point.
Thank you. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Iverson, who joined us a few minutes ago. Welcome, Dr. Iverson.
Good evening. Thank you, Trustee Valen. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Before we move on to the next point, were there any questions or comments from the committee members?
Yeah, I did have a comment, and I think this is generally throughout the document. A lot of the responses state that the new process has been put in place in, let's say, September or November. How do we get assurance that there's nothing in the gap that's still pending and that needs to be addressed in, I guess the fiscal year starts July 1. So what happens from July 1? Like, how do we know there's nothing still outstanding?
And that is a very good question. Because our audit was done a little late, September, October. I come from the world, your world. I came from the private sector. I'm in the the school setting now. Amy and I have put procedures together. And you know what? If you as a committee would like, we'll keep you updated. We'll give you a quarterly report, tell you where we're at, and we can just keep you updated that way. I got to tell you personally, I take these audit comments seriously, because It is somebody from the outside who is coming in and reviewing our records. Something that we may have taken as flippant, let's just say, and they bring to our attention. So we've addressed everything here. We've put procedures in place. And again, to reassure the committee, we can come back to you in 3-4 months and say, here's where we're at. Here's where we're at with item 1, 2, 3, 4, and give you an update that way.
I think
So,
that would be helpful.
David?
so is that about like maybe March? You said quarterly, so I guess the next one's
Sure.
January, and then, yeah.
Sure,
Okay, so that dovetails
absolutely.
with our existing meetings. We could do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great idea, Mr. Owens and Ms. Raymond. I really appreciate it. I think that really helps with transparency as well for, this meeting is live streamed. Our community is always watching and making sure that we're doing the right things. And this helps with everyone knowing where the money's going, how it's being managed, how it's being watched. So I really appreciate it as well.
And I have to tell you, I think I've said this to Dr. Iverson more than once, and she's gonna probably roll her eyes at me, but I treat the district that I work in as if it's my own, as if I'm a taxpayer. And I want to see, where are my tax dollars going? Because we have to answer to the taxpayers and we have to answer to the public. We're trying to provide the best education that we can to our students, but we have to be cognizant of what our taxpayers are paying for that.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next point. I think we all agree.
Okay,
with
so
what
the
you said,
next
Ms.
point,
Raymond.
yep. The next point would be old receivable balances. So this really involves, because of the times we're in, this involves the pandemic. This goes back to the 2021 school year. So we, being Greenburgh and where we are situated within our proximity to New York City and all of our other communities, we have a lot of health and welfare billing and non-resident tuition that we bill other districts and we bill New York City. Unfortunately, I have to tell you, in any district that I have worked in where we have had New York City resident students in a district, New York City is not, they're not forthcoming and they're not current on paying their tuition. So yes, we do have old receivables. We have researched a lot of them. We are waiting to hear from New York City because we do have money that is owed to us from New York City. We'll get it. It's just going to take probably within this year, maybe the beginning of next year. That's just the way that they operate. Everything else, Amy and Lori D'Amico in my office are researching, and we are on top of all of this, as well as you're going to see with the accounts payable. We've been cited that we have accounts payable that are old. And again, it's because of the pandemic and because people were not active, they were remote, nobody was current. We are with our vendors and people that owe us money just to rectify what is going on. Do we still owe you money, etc.?
David?
So under old receivable balances, you got due from other governments. That's the 300,000. That's where
Yes.
New York City is coming from. Then
That a good portion of that is New York City.
okay, that makes sense. The 300,000. Okay, so then the 191 is probably from a bunch of other places. Are there any big? You got the $636,000 of state and federal aid receivable. That's the
Okay.
biggest piece. Who else
Yes.
is delinquent? Is it a big block or a lot of little things?
Nope, it's not that people are delinquent, David. It has to do with the state education department. As you know, SED or the governor has mandated that schools be in full session, but the state education department is still working from home. So let me give you an example. I had a deadline that I had to meet, and I sent everything via the STD website or the portal. I get a phone call and they're like, well, where is document ABC? And I said, oh, I already sent that. It's in the portal. And I mailed a hard copy, which is what you're supposed to do. We're still working from home. Could you just email it to me?
Yeah.
So there's a disconnect there. And it still is in force. Amy can attest to that. We've been working with our state aid forms, and people are calling us to verify numbers, verify documents that we have sent to them, and you can hear their dog barking in the background, and they're like, oh no, we're still working from home. So some of that state and federal aid receivable is SCD numbers. It's money that we are owed from them. But again, the committees haven't reconvened. They haven't reviewed past state aid numbers. Nothing is developing. So I don't want to erase those off of our books, because one of them is a transportation issue.
Okay.
We're owed this money. I don't want to take it off of our books because I know we're going to get it. They just have to reconvene.
Michael?
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, I just, I know later in the document, it talks about accounts payable balances are required by general municipal law to be written off after 1 year. So is there any law that we're bumping up against when receivables are not treated the same way?
I'm not sure about that. I like to keep the receivables on the books so that way we could reverse them and not make it look like we've overstated our revenues. But I would say, let's see, we are in December, probably around March, April. Amy and I will review, and Lori, because Lori does a lot of the billing for our accounts receivable. If we haven't received them, we'll write them off. We definitely will. Same thing with accounts payable. I might have received something from Staples, let's say. I never received a bill. I contact Staples. Where's the bill? Where's the processing? And if they can't find it, I'll write it off. But I might receive a bill in a future year, and then I have to pay for it out of that year's funds. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Right.
Okay, so we've just kind of covered the receivables and payables. If we move on to reconciliation of interfund activity, Ms. Raymond?
Yep. So let me just look. Okay. So what that is that because of cyber fraud, those kind of things, SCD requires that you just have one main bank account. Everything that they pay you comes into that account, and then you transfer it out amongst the funds. We had that. We had one general fund account, but we also had a federal fund account. They want us to close the federal fund account, have everything funneled through the general fund, and then Amy will disperse it to the other funds. And she is currently working with our bank and our contact person that we're going to close that federal fund account and just have everything flow through the general fund, and then we'll disperse it that way.
Okay. Any questions on this area?
The spelling correction under district response and reconciliation of interfund activity. Respect fund should be respective fund.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
That was my note. Okay, moving on to, and I apologize, I cannot see all committee members. So if I miss you raising your hand, please jump in. We are a small group, so. All right, moving on to cash outstanding checks.
Yep, Amy and I have spoken about that, and anything that is, as she does the monthly bank recs, anything that is 1 month or 1 year or older, we will write that off. And I don't mean to sound heartless or anything, but it's not our obligation to ask somebody to cash their check. that we send them. If it has been outstanding for over a year, we'll write it off. And that's what our auditors were getting at. That anything that is on the bank rec that is over 1 year old needs to be written off. And Amy has already begun that process, and we will adhere to that. Every month she will review that.
Is this part of the monthly checklist? I think I saw referenced somewhere else.
Yes. Mhm. Yep.
Okay. Anyone else have a comment on this area? If not, we'll move on to again, another accounts payable.
Yep.
Related item.
Again, old accounts payable, we will review that. Again, I hesitate to write off any accounts payable that is over a year old without contacting the firm because of the pandemic and where they are at with their organization. We will contact them. If we don't get any responses, I would say, let's say within 3 to 4 months, then we will write them off.
Moving on to special aid fund.
Yep, so the FS25s, when you apply for a federal grant, there's an application. And with that application, you have to give what's called an FS10. The FS10 is the budget summary of where you're going to spend the money. Once that is approved by the state and federal government, you can start utilizing those funds as you pay people. So in a federal fund, you have to start paying people, paying for services, paying for supplies, whatever, before you can ask for the money back. How do you ask for the money back? Through an FS25. So the business office now will assume, which we haven't in the past, but we will now assume doing the FS25s, which is called a drawdown. So a lot of the federal funds, the money that we use is for salaries. So as we go through the year, quarterly, Amy or someone else in the business office will do an FS25 to ask a Title I, Title II, Title III, 4, 5, Section 611, Section 619. Hey, we've paid teacher A this much money for these 3 or 4 months. Now we want to be reimbursed. We will now be doing that so that it is current and that we will be getting drawdowns so that we can pay back the general fund for what we're loaning the federal funds.
Okay, seeing no hands raised, we'll move on to special purpose fund.
Okay, so the Greenburgh Central School District got money from Texaco for STEAM projects. That all happened during the pandemic. So we were cited on this last year. The high school did spend part of these monies, but then the pandemic happened. We were remote. Nothing was spent after that. So there's money left over. So what the auditors are saying here is that, listen, you were given $6,505. Why didn't you spend the whole thing? We know that. I've spoken with Mr. Smith. He has spoken with his STEAM teachers, and they realize that they have this money to spend. Now that we are back learning, we're not in remote anymore, he and his STEAM teachers are working on spending the remaining funds of this money from this award that we were given from Texaco.
Any questions on this item? I have just one. You said this money was designated specifically for STEAM items. Was it designated for the high school, or was it targeted for the Science Extravaganza, which is a district-wide event that in normal years happens in the spring?
It is my understanding that it was given to the high school.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So then, as far as extracurricular activities are concerned, I understand the comment that the auditors are raising. If there is no activity in an extracurricular activity club, it's supposed to be dissolved. there were, I believe, 14 instances where there was no activity. And that was basically because of the pandemic. And even if we were in-person learning, we didn't allow after-school activities. So I am not recommending that we disband these clubs because they are active now. I acknowledge and I agree with what they are saying in this bullet point. But it was a special circumstance. So, we can deal with that. As far as that there was a club that was named sales tax, that's not right. And we have rectified that. Every club needs to realize that there are things that they have to pay sales tax on. And as those clubs do those activities, when it's recorded, it also has to be recorded that here's the sales tax you have to pay. So if you made $1,000 profit from this fundraiser, it might be $100 that has to go to sales tax. You can spend $900. So we have disbanded that club and designated that along a line item along all of the clubs so that they realize how much it is that they have to pay. I also thought personally, it was a good idea to have bank reconciliations done through our financial software. And that's what we were doing. Our auditors feel that we need to have that done manually, and that's fine. We can do it both ways, and that'll just be a double check. As far as the club deficit of $925, that was prior to me. That was prior to Amy. We don't know where that has come from. We don't know where that has originated from. They have gone back to 2018, 19. We haven't gone back any further than that. But what is going to have to happen is any club deficit. So if a club disbands, so let me give you an example. The class of 2021, if they had money left over in their account and they didn't spend it, they didn't buy something for the school as donated by the class of 2021, any excess funds goes to student council. Any deficit that happens will be the responsibility of student council. So that $925 deficit that is in that club, if we can't figure out where it came from or how we have to deal with it, that'll have to come from student council.
Just a quick comment in regards to taking away the automation of the reconciliation. I guess what reason why would that be the case? And is there any chance that we can push back to the auditors? It just seems like that would be inefficient and take more time, and just due to lack of resources, it just doesn't seem like the right way. So I'm just not understanding that comment.
And I thank you for that comment because I didn't understand it either. And I pushed back to them. And I would think that if we did it through a financial software, it would be more efficient or more accurate than if we did it manually. I'm not really exactly sure, but I can ask them.
Yeah, I mean, how many cash accounts are there to reconcile?
There's only one.
Okay, just one. All right. Yeah, it just seems like the automation would be helpful. So I think that's probably worth fighting for. That
yes,
we could pass on that change.
David?
So let me ask you, you're coming up with a handbook, I see from your response.
Yes.
Is there an orientation? Do all the club treasurers get together and learn about this thing and what they have to do, or
Yes.
how's it rolled out?
And that is a very good question, Trustee Warner. We have started this year. We've put this handbook together and we are having a meeting with all advisors, all coaches, anybody who's going to raise money. Here is what has to happen. Because, a lot of times people or organizations don't realize that an extracurricular club is there to teach the students how to manage money, how to be a business. And they are the ones that have to do it. The advisor is there to advise. So that's what we're trying to educate them on. And that's through our handbook and through these seminars.
Okay.
And what is the frequency planned for the seminars? Is that going to be a recurring seminar?
Oh, it will be. If anything, it will be annually. And I say annually because the clubs are established in the beginning of the year. We have this meeting, we tell them how they have to operate. If anybody needs a refresher or what have you, we're more than welcome or help them. But my extracurricular treasurer, I have charged her with that as a club or a class does a fundraiser. For example, let's say the senior class does a Yankee Candle fundraiser and it ends December 15th. Okay, all the money is collected, et cetera, et cetera. In January, we're going to deposit the money into their account, but I also need a profit and loss statement. I need all of that stuff to show that the students have learned, here's what we took in, here's what we spent, here's what the net is. That's the whole purpose of extracurricular activities.
Yeah, I think that's great. And as long as, the club members might change year over year, just making sure
Right.
that that's an annual at least, I think that would be super.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry.
Tracy?
I think also I'm wondering if, since it's the student clubs that are going to be doing this and it's the students that are going to be learning the work, is there going to be any information that's shared with the students and or the parents to understand that this is a change? Because this is a change. It's the right thing to do, but it is slightly a change in the culture of how we do things.
So that is the responsibility of the advisor, is to educate the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer on how the organization is supposed to run. But we can always extend our services and help them in
Okay,
educating
thank you.
them.
But that's helpful that they need to explain that to the children. Okay.
Yep.
thanks.
Mhm.
Okay, if there's no one else, I do have a few comments. One is a niggly little thing. In the response and in your comments, you said all extracurricular clubs were not active during this time. That's not completely accurate. So I wouldn't mind, I would like to suggest that you change this phrasing to be all extracurricular clubs were not actively fundraising during this time, because there were some clubs that were meeting, but they were not fundraising. So just to be completely
Correct.
100% accurate, I suggest that rewording.
Sure.
And I think some of the others have asked my questions. I did take a quick look at the extra classroom activity fund list to get a feel for what the other what some of the other 14 clubs that may be inactive were. And I did, and this is not directly applicable to the corrective action plan. And I know you said here in the response, you're going to be reviewing those inactive clubs, because there are definitely 5 that I don't know if they actually are clubs. But we can follow up on that later as you review that list with your department. Okay. So I think we're at the last.
And just so you know,
Mhm.
any club, if it is inactive after a year and we decide to disband them, if there is a balance in that club, it goes to student council. And the reason is student council encapsulates all the students. That's why SED has decided that any funds that are, or any clubs that are disbanded and then there's money left over, goes to student council. Any money that is owed has to come from student council.
Right. I don't actually even see student council on the list. I think because each class has their own separate government. But again, that's when you go through and talk to your staff members, I'm sure
Right.
you'll discover how that can be allocated appropriately. So it's the most general club
Yes.
possible. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then the last one is school lunch fund. We have been cited on this for the last 2 years. It is something, as far as I'm concerned, this is something that is good, that our school lunch fund has a positive balance at year end. It has a fund balance. It's not in a deficit, where many schools are in a deficit. So they're saying that we should only have 3 months worth of expenses in fund balance. We acknowledge that, but you have to remember that a lot of our equipment is outdated. And as things need to be replaced, Gary O'Grady speaks with me. I speak with Dr. Iverson, and we decide what needs to be replaced. And that's really where our fund balance is at. We are reserving our fund balance to replace outdated equipment as it is needed.
Tracy, I'm not sure if you're raising your hand or reaching for something.
Oh, I was reaching for something, sorry.
Okay. All right. If no one else has a comment, I do have a question related.
Sure. Can they see it? So is there a way that you said, okay, we think we're going to spend this much money on equipment, and so there's a line item in there, and then we commit the funds to some kind of equipment upgrade, or is it
Okay.
visible?
So for example, this year, just starting this year, we needed a new warming table and we need a new refrigerator. That wasn't anticipated, but because we have this fund balance, we can amend our budget in the cafeteria fund so that we can get those items. Yeah, Gary is really good that he can foresee what needs to, what are the ages of a lot of the equipment. But when something goes down and we try to get it fixed and a company says to us, sorry, we can't get those parts anymore, we have to replace the whole unit. That's what's happening just recently.
Okay, so it's not like planned replacement. It's fixed as it breaks, and something's going to break. So you have a kind of an average of what's going to fall apart in any given year, and you have to replace. Okay, I understand.
Correct.
So that would be a generic category, not an item.
So that kind of ties into the question I was going to ask. If we have a list or a schedule or a priority list of what might be next on the replacement timetables.
Yeah, well, we tried to,
if it's written down anywhere.
Right. We try to get the most out of our equipment. We try to stretch it as far as we can, because I got to tell you, things are really very, very expensive lately. Gary wanted to replace a heating, I don't know what it's called. It's a serving line, but it's heated, and we had to replace a refrigerator. We had the money to do that. Then the company came back and said, sorry, the cost of the refrigerated unit has increased. It tripled.
What?
So we had to pick which one were we going to do? And we had to replace the refrigerated unit. We're getting through with the heating table. And that's just the nature of what's happening right now.
Right. Okay. That's unfortunate, but you're right. It's the way things are. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions about the corrective action plan overall? Any other comments? If not, do we recommend that this be presented to the board at the December 7th meeting for adoption or approval or whatever the correct verbiage is?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, I just want to point out that this will be presented to the board next Tuesday, December 7th. If Ms. Mares and Dr. Iverson can ensure that that is an agenda item for next Tuesday, that would be great.
Yes, we'll make sure. Listen, for the board though, what's the method? And I don't know if this is the right place, but how do we want this presentation to be to the board. I mean, this was a little bit more detailed, you know, we took about 40 minutes doing it. Does anyone have any idea here of what are we going to expect from Ms. Raymond as far as the presentation?
I expect a 5-minute summary and a board vote.
Agreed.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
But then the final version we received today, or what will be the final version, will be in the packet Friday. So the board theoretically will have time to review it before the meeting if they have their own questions, but.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to put in a reminder for the non-board members of our committee. I did email a confidentiality form. If you could take a look at it and send me any questions that you have or that I can pass along to our lawyers, I would appreciate that review and signature, please. And I guess we will next convene January, February, when the draft internal audit report is ready, once we hear. And I think that's all for tonight. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Nope. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting adjourns at 8:13. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
for the last minute.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
See
you.
y'all later, everybody.